From 2010 to 2013, across the United Kingdom, 5 houses in turn became crime scenes. The perpetrators were not intruders. They were those closest: a young mother, a girlfriend, a neighbor. They concealed violence beneath the cover of ordinary life, until the curtain fell with cries cut short with fire or with the swing of a hammer in the dark. In the criminal record, they were given a haunting name: the most evil female killers in the United Kingdom. Birmingham, January 2011. Inside a small flat in Ward End, 2-year-old Keanu Williams was found unconscious on his bed. When the ambulance brought him to the hospital, the doctor wrote a single cold line: cardiac arrest, suspected head trauma. Examination revealed a body covered in bruises, old fractures mixed with new internal organs badly damaged. Not an accident. This was the trace of prolonged abuse. Rebecca Shuttleworth, the 24-year-old mother, carried her son into the emergency ward that morning. She said the child had fallen from the bed, but in earlier medical notes, doctors had already recorded multiple unexplained injuries. Neighbors had heard persistent crying through the night, sometimes mixed with the sound of heavy blows on the floor. A woman from the same block told police, "I always thought something was wrong, but I had no proof." Rebecca grew up in an unstable environment, with separated parents and frequent relocations. Those who once knew her described her as temperamental, quick to anger, unable to maintain lasting ties. As a teenager, she had run away from home for weeks, returning thin, with dark circles under her eyes. The fractures of childhood stretched into adulthood, but no one thought they would become a chain of violent acts against her own child. While living with her new boyfriend, Rebecca often left Keanu alone at home for hours. Police noted that she had once locked the boy in a dark room, withholding food. The 2-year-old, with curly black hair and a small face, rarely smiled in the few photographs later found on a phone. Instead, the images preserved by doctors were X-rays. Fractured ribs, cracks in the arm, unmistakable signs of abuse. On January 9th, the case reached its end. The night before, neighbors heard shouting. The next morning, Rebecca called an ambulance. When police arrived, they found a disorderly flat, unfinished food on the table, and a cot in the corner. The blanket in the cot was stained with blood. A broken edge of the wooden frame bore a mark of impact. Autopsy confirmed Keanu died of head trauma, with severe internal injuries caused by heavy blows. The wounds showed this was not the first time. In the record, the pathologist wrote, "Repeated abuse over a prolonged period, resulting in death." Rebecca was arrested immediately after the report was released. In interrogation, she remained silent, occasionally shaking her head. Investigators recorded one short line she spoke: "I didn't want to hurt him. I just lost control." The 2013 trial drew significant attention. The jury heard a series of evidence from hospitals, testimonies from neighbors, and X-ray records. The prosecutor described Rebecca as a systematic abuser. The defense pointed to an unstable childhood and the pressure of raising a child alone. But it did not alter the verdict. In the end, the court declared life imprisonment with a minimum term of 18 years. In the courtroom, Rebecca lowered her head, hair covering half her face, showing little expression. Outside, the people of Birmingham placed flowers and small teddy bears beside a photograph of Keanu. A handwritten note left a line: "You should not have gone this way." The resonance of the case lay not only in the sentence, but in the silence that stretched for months before. Injuries appeared one after another, yet no one had sufficient proof to stop it. The empty cot in the flat became the haunting image, a place where a child should have slept peacefully, turned into evidence of brutality. Rebecca Shuttleworth, from a mother, became one of the names tied to the list of the most evil female killers in the United Kingdom. And the question remained: how many cries were ignored before silence became permanent? In the file of Keanu Williams, the X-ray films spoke in place of all words. But that empty cot was not the only case. At the same time, only a few miles away, another hospital recorded a chain of unexplained injuries on the body of an 11-month-old boy. Windsor, a quiet town on the outskirts of London. Winter of 2010. In a small flat on the third floor of an old building, an 11-month-old infant was brought to the hospital unconscious. His name was Callum Wilson. A small face, light brown hair, a body with only faint breaths left. Medical records noted bruises spread across his body, fractured ribs, a cracked arm, severe head trauma. When doctors looked at the sequence of layered injuries, they knew this was not the result of a single accident. It was the outcome of repeated abuse, day after day, week after week. The one who brought Callum to the hospital was his mother, Emma Wilson, 22 years old. She told emergency staff that her son had fallen from a high chair while eating. But X-rays showed fractures in different stages of healing. A doctor wrote in the report, "Cannot occur at the same time." This is repeated trauma. Emma grew up in southern England, in an ordinary middle-class family. At school, she was unremarkable, with no lasting friendships. Teachers described her as temperamental, sometimes prone to sudden anger. As a teenager, she skipped classes repeatedly, then left home to live with a boyfriend. Short relationships left a chain of instability. When she gave birth to Callum, she lived alone, without stable support from family or partner. Neighbors recalled, "We rarely saw her take the child outside. The flat's door was almost always shut." In Callum's first months of life, hospitals had already recorded multiple injuries: bruising around the eyes, a sprained arm, then a fractured rib. Each time, Emma provided different explanations. Slipped from the bed, fell while learning to walk. But none were consistent. Social services had been alerted. Yet, there was not enough evidence to intervene. The fatal night came in early 2011. Callum was brought to the hospital in critical condition. Emergency surgery could not save him. Forensic conclusion: death from severe head trauma. The pathologist emphasized in the report: the victim was subjected to strong force, inconsistent with any domestic accident. Emma was arrested at the hospital. During interrogation, she sat in silence for hours, sometimes shedding tears, but offering no admission. When asked directly, she only said, "I didn't mean to. I just lost control." Those few words were intruders, recorded in the file as a vague form of confession. The trial at Reading Crown Court in 2013 revealed every detail. The prosecution presented evidence: 20 separate injuries, some sustained only weeks before Callum's death. Witnesses included pediatricians, neighbors, and social workers who had once raised concerns. The jury heard each piece of evidence, each X-ray displayed, a small skeleton marked with multiple fractures. The defense cited the pressures of single motherhood, postpartum depression. But those arguments could not erase the physical evidence on the child's body. The sentence was delivered: life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 14 years. Emma Wilson, once a young mother, was now a convict charged with killing her own child. She left court in a prison van, head lowered, hair covering her face. No relatives were present. After the trial, the Windsor flat was left vacant, windows sealed. Neighbors said that for months they were haunted by the memory of cries once heard from that room. Someone wrote on a small piece of paper, "Left beneath the building." That cry should have been heard. In the rare list of cases committed by women, the name Emma Wilson emerged as a cold emblem. No unusual weapon, no elaborate scheme, only a chain of silent violence inside a locked flat. And when the door finally opened, the truth had come too late. Emma Wilson became another fragment in the list of the most evil female killers in the United Kingdom. Another demonstration that violence can hide beneath the familiar image of a mother holding her child. After Callum's death, the file closed with a life sentence and a flat sealed by its windows. But in another town, only months later, police opened a new file. This time, the victim was not a child. It was a 77-year-old man who believed he was offering a young girlfriend a place to live. Haverhill, Suffolk. December 2011. Police received a call reporting an elderly man dead in his own home. The victim, Paul Norfolk, 77, a former soldier, known as a kind man who often helped neighbors. He lived alone after his wife's death from Alzheimer's, then allowed a young woman to move in and share his home. That woman was Bunthawai, known by the nickname Pacer. The relationship between the two was difficult to define. At once, a girlfriend, a tenant, and a dependent. Neighbors said they often saw Rimmer walking with Norfolk on the street, sometimes holding his hand, sometimes arguing loudly. But in the eyes of the community, her presence did not raise much suspicion. A friend of Norfolk remarked, "He just wanted companionship." At that age, the silence in the house was too heavy. On the night of December 18th, everything ended. Norfolk was found dead in his bedroom, his head bearing multiple injuries from a heavy object. Beside him lay a hammer stained with blood. At first, Rimmer attempted to stage the scene as a suicide. She called police in a trembling voice, saying her boyfriend had harmed himself. But forensic examination quickly dismissed this. The wounds on the head could not have been self-inflicted. The direction of the blows from behind, with force and precision. Bunthawai Rimmer, 39, had a past marked by alcohol and domestic violence. Raised in an unstable family, she left home at 16, drifting through short relationships. Medical records noted signs of substance dependency and emotional disorder. Those who once knew her said she often lost control when drunk. Moving in with Norfolk gave her a rare sense of shelter and stability, but also bred quiet tension. The investigation revealed that in the weeks before Norfolk's death, Rimmer frequently quarreled about money. Norfolk was said to have wanted to end the relationship while Rimmer resisted leaving. That night, as Norfolk slept, she took a hammer from a drawer and struck his head multiple times. Investigators noted the perpetrator deliberately chose the moment when the victim was asleep to avoid resistance. Afterward, Rimmer placed the hammer on the floor, then called police, attempting to present the scene as a suicide carried out in despair. At the 2012 trial, forensic evidence became decisive. The blows were straight, deliberate, positioned in a way impossible for self-infliction. In addition, blood spatter on Rimmer's clothing showed she had stood near the victim during the attack. The prosecution concluded this was an intentional killing, not accident or suicide. Bunthawai Rimmer showed little reaction in court. She only lowered her head, at times whispering, "I don't remember clearly. Everything happened too fast." But the jury did not accept it. The sentence was delivered. Life imprisonment with a minimum of 11 years. After sentencing, the house on Castle Lane where Paul Norfolk had lived was sealed. Neighbors said that for weeks, they still saw the curtain move in the wind. The bedroom, where he once lay, now a closed crime scene. One neighbor placed flowers at the door with a short note. He only wanted someone beside him. The Rimmer case left a distinct after-effect. No child left behind, no family tie. But betrayal was clear. An elderly man who believed he was offering someone a home was killed in his sleep. The hammer, an ordinary tool, became the weapon. And in the list of the most evil female killers in the United Kingdom, the name Bunthawai Pacer Rimmer was added as another demonstration. Violence can emerge from what seems like companionship. Paul Norfolk's house was sealed, windows shut tight, leaving behind the silence of a relationship ended by a hammer. But only a few months later, in another town, death did not come in the darkness of a bedroom. It came from fire, rising at the foot of a staircase, consuming an entire family within minutes. The killer did not use a knife, nor direct violence. Only a can of petrol, a match, and a petty resentment turned into a death sentence for 5 lives. Prestatyn, a coastal town in North Wales. October 2012. The quiet night was broken by the sound of fire alarms. Police and firefighters arrived at a house on Groes. When the flames were contained, the scene emerged. 5 bodies, 3 children and 2 adults, motionless in the ashes. The family of Leanna Shears had not escaped the house. Initial findings showed the fire began downstairs, at the staircase leading to the bedrooms. Police quickly determined it was no accident. Marks on the floor revealed flammable liquid had been poured, flames set to block the only exit. An investigator noted, the fire was deliberately set, the aim clear, to prevent escape. The perpetrator was Melanie Jane Smith, 30 years old, living in the ground floor flat of the same building. Her anger came from minor disputes with the Shears family. Clothes hung in the hallway. The noise of children playing. Neighbors had heard Smith complain, threatening repeatedly. A nearby resident recalled, she often shouted, saying she would make them regret it. On the night of October 19th, Smith bought alcohol, then carried a can of petrol to her neighbor's staircase. As the household slept, she lit the fire. Flames spread quickly. Thick smoke filled the house within minutes. Leanna Shears, 30, her partner, Liam Timbrell, and their 3 children, Charlie, 2, Bailey, 4, and Sky, only 20 months, were trapped upstairs. They cried for help but could not get out. Neighbors stood outside, helpless, hearing the voices fade into the smoke. When firefighters reached them, it was too late. 5 bodies were carried out in silence, wrapped in white sheets. The forensic report recorded death from inhalation of toxic smoke, unable to escape. The blaze had been fueled by accelerant, not electrical fault. Melanie Smith was arrested within hours. When police knocked on her door, she still smelled of alcohol, her clothes tainted with smoke. In questioning, she denied, then changed her account repeatedly, claiming she only meant to scare, never thinking the fire would spread so fast. But the evidence was undeniable. Witnesses saw her with the petrol can. Security cameras captured a figure entering the stairwell just before the fire. The trial at Mold Crown Court lasted weeks. The prosecution presented images of the scene. Family photographs still smiling on a phone, placed beside pictures of the charred house. Neighbors' testimony echoed through the courtroom. I heard the children screaming. We were powerless. The defense pointed to Smith's unstable mental state, depression, and alcohol dependence, but it could not reduce the charge. The jury quickly reached agreement: murder. The judge delivered the sentence: life imprisonment with a minimum term of 30 years. In the courtroom, Smith sat motionless, eyes fixed on the floor. No tears, only silence. Afterward, the house in Prestatyn was cleared, but the blackened marks on the walls remained. The wooden staircase that had burned was replaced with cold concrete. Neighbors placed flowers and small toys at the door. A ribbon read, "5 lives, lost to one reckless act." The case of Melanie Jane Smith left one of the most haunting images in the record of female crime in Britain. An ordinary woman, a familiar neighbor, who in a moment of anger turned the family above her into ash. No knife, no gun, only fire, enough to erase 5 lives. In the list of the most evil female killers in the United Kingdom, her name became a distinct mark, a clear example that petty resentment can become tragedy. When flames rise from ordinary spite, the fire at Prestatyn destroyed an entire family, leaving a charred wall as a permanent trace of trivial hatred. But not every case came from neighbor disputes or daily quarrels. Only a year later, in North London, tragedy unfolded inside a small flat, windows still covered with children's curtains in bright colors. This time, it was not a mother, not a neighbor. North London, summer 2013. In a small flat in Wood Green, police knocked after a call reporting lost contact. When the door opened, the scene inside became one of the darkest pages of family crime records. On the bedroom floor, the bodies of 2 children were found, a 5-year-old named Anipan and a 7-month-old named Nathaban. Beside them, their father, Jiovani Vissa Weeswaran, lay lifeless. At first, police suspected gas poisoning, but examination quickly ruled it out. The 2 children had died from strangulation, deep marks visible on their skin. The father, Jiovani, was dead by hanging. In the report, the investigator wrote a short note: murder-suicide. Jiovani, 30 years old, of South Asian background, had once worked in a small shop with no serious criminal record. Those who knew him said he was quiet, gentle, but burdened by financial pressure. Bills piled up, debts stretched on, his marriage collapsed. After his wife left, Jiovani lived alone with the 2 children. Neighbors often saw him taking them to the park, but also heard arguments in the flat late at night. On the final day, everything unfolded in silence. No cries for help escaped the walls. The windows still held bright curtains with cartoon characters. The flat was cluttered, toys scattered across the floor. In the corner, 2 small beds still held disordered pillows and blankets, signs the children had been pulled from their sleep. The pathologist concluded Anipan and Nathaban were strangled by hand, with no signs of strong resistance. Perhaps they did not have time to understand what was happening. Death came quickly and silently. Afterward, Jiovani used a rope to hang himself in the same flat. On the table, police found a handwritten note, no longer than a few lines, reading only, "I'm sorry. I had no other choice." No trial, No defense. The file closed with an investigation report and forensic conclusion. But its after effect shook the community. A neighbor told the press, "I used to see him pushing the stroller, smiling at me. I can't believe those hands did this." The media reported for days, but the motive remained unclear. Debt, depression, despair. No one could state with certainty. Police wrote a single line in the final report. The note suggests psychological entrapment. After the incident, the flat in Wood Green was sealed. Children's toys remained inside, beds left untouched. Neighbors placed teddy bears and white flowers at the door. A small piece of paper, scrawled in a child's hand with pencil, read, "Goodbye, Anipan." In the list of cases committed by women, the name Jiovani Weeswaran appeared as an exception. The killer was a father, not a mother. But the common thread remained. The home turned into the place of death. Family members themselves became the perpetrators. It added another dark layer to the portrait of domestic killings, where killer and victim shared the same roof. And when the file closed, what remained were two empty beds in a room with cartoon curtains. Beds like Keanu's cot, like Callum's sealed flat, like the burned staircase of the Shears family. All cold markers engraving the same unanswered question. Why does the place called home so often become the grave of the smallest lives? In the list of the most evil female killers in the United Kingdom, the Weeswaran case stood at the end, a reminder that sometimes gender is not the boundary. When darkness enters a home, the killer can be anyone. These were not only murders, they were absolute betrayals within the very place meant to provide safety. Each house in those years became a scene, then sealed, emptied, erased from the ordinary rhythm of the street. In the records, dry words grouped them under the same label: the most evil female killers in the United Kingdom. But outside the sealed doors, one question remained. If even home is not a refuge, then where is safe? If in these 5 houses there was a detail you cannot shake from your mind, leave your trace in the comments. Because sometimes silence is what allows these crimes to repeat. And if you wish to continue opening forgotten files, do not forget to subscribe, so that when a new episode is unsealed, you will be the first to step into the closed room. Remember, every door can be locked, but truth cannot.